Alright everyone, unfortunate daily necessary message here. There are links in the description of this video if you're watching on any platform to various sites that I'm on. So if you're on YouTube, you can consider joining me elsewhere at this point because I'm being shadow banned. If you prefer YouTube and you're seeing this on the platform, make sure to share it out on like maybe Facebook, Twitter, Minds, whatever, because then it'll actually be searchable. YouTube has buried me in the search results and frequently doesn't even tell most of my subscribers I've uploaded. So that being out of the way, we'll get to our videos of the day. I longed for the day that I'm no longer shadow banned, so that I'm off the naughty list so that I don't have to make these fucking stupid messages every day. Trump is still going for it, and as I reported the other day, with Trump blocking Biden's transition team from Pentagon meetings, I think that he really does take seriously the claims of fraud. I don't think that it's just Trump being Trump, he's being a blowhard, he doesn't like to lose. No, I think that legitimately he understands what I think a large proportion of the U.S. population does, which is that there was fraud in the U.S. election. You can think that it didn't tip the election, but quite clearly we've seen enough proven irregularities already to amount to many tens of thousands of votes in various states. And what Trump's done now is he's in communication with the House Speaker in Pennsylvania. He's constantly trying to goad the Georgia Republicans. And what he's trying to do, I do not believe that Trump thinks that he can win the election through affecting the state legislative bodies here. Number one, in Georgia, they've already made it clear they're not going to be any help. In Pennsylvania, they're trying to block him, although there is a significant proportion of the House Republicans there that do support Trump. In Arizona, it's iffy. The problem is that even if Trump were to flip Pennsylvania and Georgia, let's say that he got the two big ones, he'd still be 2 electoral votes shy. Therefore, what I think he's trying to do is simply up the pressure enough to force SCOTUS's hand. I don't think that this is as likely to play out in a state house as it is in the halls of the judiciary. I think that what Trump's basic strategy is this. If he can cast enough doubt on the election, has enough affidavits, enough backers within the GOP to potentially crack the party apart, which would be hysterical. As a non-Republican, if Trump destroys the Republican Party, who cares? You know, something else will rise up in its place, and probably better than the GOP. America First movement, nativist party, and hell, a bunch of fucking JFK-style classical liberals would be better than the modern Republican Party, because they're cowards and they never do anything good that they ever say that they want to do. The only things that they ever do are cuck for the Democrats anyway, so half of them are fucking goddamn useless. What I think he's trying to do is increase the social pressure on the nation enough so that people will want this to play out in the judiciary. If that happens, SCOTUS is then in the unenviable position where they have to try not to look biased while acting in their potential own self-interest, because keep in mind, if you're Coney Barrett, if you're Kavanaugh, if you're Clarence Thomas, you're a conservative justice, which means you're not one of the 4 leftist justices, which includes John Roberts. The idea that he's a conservative is asinine, looking at the decisions he's made throughout time, or refused to make as well. You have Beijing Biden, and you have Trump. Beijing Biden has clearly stated multiple times that he's not going to tell us whether he intends to expand the Supreme Court. He faces pressure within his party to do so. Now, do I think he would be successful? No, ultimately I don't think so. Not even if they win both of these Georgia Senate seats. Even if the Dems hold the Senate, it's going to be a real tough sell to some of those House Democrats to get that passed. Because you need the consent of the legislature in order to add more SCOTUS justices or to delete some. I think he'd be unsuccessful. But if I'm a conservative justice, I've been duly placed on the court. Beijing Biden is at least insinuating that I'm biased in a political manner, that I shouldn't have any latitude, and that basically my belief should be blocked out by the expansion of SCOTUS. I might act in the interest of the court, in maintaining its composure, in maintaining its decorum, by saying, okay, well, I'm going to construe these election results as invalid, and here's how that can play out. Trump cannot get 270 electors with his state-level challenges. There simply aren't enough states. With Georgia presumably not going his way, even if he picks up Pennsylvania and manages to grab Arizona, he's still somewhere shy of I think he'd be at 259 or something around there. Biden would still win. But if he can get just one state to question its results and throw the nation into political uproar by attempting to negate the initial electors and get new ones, SCOTUS will be pressured to act. If SCOTUS does act, and there are 5 conservatives there who can agree to take up one of these cases, if it goes before the Supreme Court, if they use a more broad argument, and the court almost never does this. Usually the court limits its arguments as much as possible to not have broad implications, because the judiciary is specifically designed to be slow, to be reluctant, to consider it a bad thing to issue large-scale decisions with wide-reaching implications, because the status quo being maintained is sort of part of the decorum of the court, except on certain major social issues. But if you have an outstanding case throwing the whole political situation into total chaos, that would be a situation in which the SCOTUS might do what it otherwise generally doesn't do. We saw this with gay marriage and a few other things. It may declare that in a blanket sense, all of the expanded absentee voting in the country was unconstitutional, that it violates the existing constitutional law. They could also more strictly decide, they could say in the specific case, for instance, of Pennsylvania, your state constitution specifically should have been amended before this. Some of those mail-in votes, therefore, invalid. Trump has won Pennsylvania. They could do that. They need to do it soon, though. They probably need to do it before the electors cast their votes. There are Republicans in some of these state legislatures trying to cause that to happen. Ted Cruz is now aboard. Now, I don't even like Ted Cruz. To be entirely clear, I've never been sold on him. I think that he's more opportunistic than principled. But I got to give him a goddamn credit, unfortunately, at this point, reluctantly, because he's saying he'll take the Pennsylvania case before the court himself. And of course, Ted Cruz, definitely very legally trained, could make a good argument. 5 conservative justices there. If I were on the court, I would rule in favor of Trump. I wouldn't even be particularly reluctant. And the reasoning is to preserve the judiciary. That's it. That's the only reason. Not that you don't have to like Trump. I could hate his fucking guts. But if the alternative is someone who won't even tell me straight up, is grifting off the population and refuses to say whether they're going to expand SCOTUS, thus nullifying my own power within the judiciary, number one, thus breaking very long-standing precedent. When's the last time the court had a change in its composure? Wasn't it the 1940s or 50s? It's a very long time ago. It's a bad idea. It sets a horrible precedent that could be potentially misused by future presidents as well. Let's say that there's a president who gets blocked by the Supreme Court and then says, well, the Supreme Court won't rule with me, I'll just stack the court. It could be a Republican doing it. What if a Republican says, hey, you know what, I want to challenge Roe v. Wade, and SCOTUS tells him to fuck off. And then they just decide to appoint 5, 6 new justices. Who's going to stop them? Because Beijing Biden already set the precedent that it's perfectly okay to do that for simply political reasons. There were attempts during the FDR era, by the way, to fiddle with the court, finally getting him smacked in the ass. Beijing Biden will probably at least make a mediocre pitch for expanding the court. And if he doesn't, then you have 4 years of locked down government anyway, so SCOTUS might as well side with Trump. I know I would. You wouldn't even have to be a supporter. And by the way, if Donald Trump had not gotten his way on a SCOTUS case and then talked about, hey, maybe I'll have a couple extra justices in here, people would have flipped their shit. All the leftists would have flipped shit, and they would be talking about decorum and precedent and all the things that I'm talking about right now. You'd be upset. You'd be extremely mad. Because it would be a bad fucking idea. And it'd be a stupid idea for any president to do it, because essentially whoever comes next can then use that same precedent to just randomly expand or contract the court. Contract it down, then the next day expand it and get, 5 new justices in. You could basically wipe the court clean if you wanted to with a simple legislative majority. That's a terrible precedent to set. It'd be horrible. Even if Biden's only got an outside chance of pulling it off if fraudulently rigged in there, Beijing Biden, the asterisk presidency, even if he has only a 5% chance of accomplishing that, we shouldn't give him that 5%. So that's what I think Trump is doing. I think that he's trying to amp up social pressure, not among just Republicans, but among leftists as well, against Biden in these state cases, hoping that at least one will make it before SCOTUS and get the 4 justices necessary to get a hearing. And once that evidentiary hearing is set, you have 5 conservative justices, 3 of which he himself appointed. They will be, I think, less reluctant than courts in the past to vote on it. And they might decide against Trump, or they may strictly construct and say, okay, well, again, in the case of Pennsylvania, as per their constitution, it was violated. Trump has won the state by default, and not extend that to the other states. They don't have to. They can have a very, very strictly confined definition of their decision. Will they? I don't know. You've got to understand, this is an outside chance. And we have had situations before on the state level, state by state, where legislative bodies have gotten involved and done what Trump wants them to do now on a much larger scale, which is throw out the electors and command them to vote differently. To get electors in there to vote for a candidate who maybe dubiously won, maybe didn't win, but there were shenanigans going on, that they like for political reasons. They can do that. It's within their power. The states are the primary sovereign entity in the United States. People need to understand that. The states are sovereign. The United States is a collective of semi-sovereign nations. That's why state legislative bodies have so much power, including with electors. That's the whole point. If he manages to force SCOTUS's hand, it'll be very interesting. And by the way, if SCOTUS takes up this case, SCOTUS doesn't take up the case, tens of millions of people are all paranoid and fucked up. If it does take up the case, they're still paranoid and fucked up regardless of the decision that they make. Trump fans won't like anything shy of them throwing out multiple state elections and giving this to Trump. Biden fans will feel robbed if that happens. Half the population is not going to trust the current administration come January 20th. It literally doesn't matter what happens from here on out. We're in a period of severe social alienation during a significant pandemic. Things are bad right now. We need to understand the socio-political situation. SCOTUS, though, in my opinion, should preserve its decorum by finding whatever way necessary to throw the election back to Trump. There was election fraud. Whether or not you believe it flipped the election, there was fraud. We know this to be the case. We have literally thousands of people willing to testify to that, to what they have seen and witnessed, willing to give sworn testimony. We have irregularities with voting machines that have been proven to exist. We have all sorts of weird, dubious stuff happening, especially in Wayne County and in Georgia. We have a weird political situation, and I think that long term, it would be better for the country if the judiciary preserves its integrity by stopping Joe Biden. That's my opinion. I think that the idea that the executive would usurp and subjugate the judiciary is about the craziest idea that I've heard in modern politics. Regardless of who the president is, if Donald Trump had said, well, SCOTUS didn't find the way I want, I'm going to add more justices, I would have been the first fucking goddamn person calling him out as a bad idea. By the way, there's something kind of similar to this, which was the end of the filibuster many years ago, which Trump and the Republicans warned at the time was a bad idea for the Democrats to start ramming through appointees by ending the filibuster. They'd said, hey, this is not a good idea. It's going to come back to haunt you. Guess what's happened with several SCOTUS appointees in the Trump administration? It came back to bite them. This will bite the left hard in the future if it happens. Therefore, I think SCOTUS should get involved, and that's clearly what Trump wants. He wants to amp up the pressure to the point where SCOTUS is less reluctant to take up a case. That's about all. Peace out.